Waifu. Anyone who's even just remotely into the otaku culture or the internet culture has heard of this word. But while knowing the word is one thing, understanding the whole concept behind it is another. And although a very popular one, the concept of waifu seems to remain quite mysterious and misunderstood for a lot of people. On one side, you have these people who just take it ironically, and for whom this concept is nothing more than a meme. And on the other side, you have these people who don't take it ironically, but who imagine that people with waifus are nothing but pathetic cringy weeaboos. And that seems to be heavily reflected in YouTube videos on the concept of waifu. Indeed, although there are some exceptions, most of those videos are casual tier stuff like waifu wars or who is best waifu, or some joke videos about waifus or videos mocking people with waifus. So I thought, why not make a video where I will truly demystify the concept of waifu and what it really implies to have one. An in-depth, serious analysis of the concept of waifu like you've probably never seen before. So these are the subjects that I will be covering in this video. First, we'll go with the origins of the term my waifu, its etymology, its use in Japanese society, and its use among Western otakus. Then we'll explore the various definitions of the term waifu, as the word is indeed used in quite many different ways. Then we'll clarify important questions such as, do people with waifus believe their waifus to be real? And how does one get a waifu in the first place? We'll also dive deeply into the question of how does one concretely live a relationship with a waifu. In doing so, we'll explore different subjects such as Dakimakuras, online waifus communities, technologies, and also marriage. After that, we'll try to put the concept of waifu into perspective, considering other forms of relationship with beings that do not tangibly exist. Next, we'll spend quite a lot of time trying to answer the question, is having a waifu healthy from a psychological perspective or not? And finally, we'll explore different scenarios such as what happens when two people love the same character, or what happens when one waifu canonically dies. I'll leave timestamps on the slide so you guys can more easily navigate through the video. But just before we start, I'll take a minute to do a little self-introduction. As you probably already figured it out, I have a waifu. Her name is Thunder Scarlet, she's from the Toe Project series, and we've been together since January 2016. I've been active on online waifus communities since January 2016, and I've been a moderator on 8kun's Born Mai since May 2020. And for those of you who might not know, 8kun is simply the rebranding of 8chan. So in the last 5 years, I had the opportunity to talk with many waifuists and read a large amount of posts and comments from hundreds of waifuists, so I thought I could share the knowledge I got from it with you guys today. So let's begin, the origins of the my waifu term, starting with its etymology. So it's derived from the English my wife, but with a Japanese pronunciation, so they try to pronounce my wife, but they end up saying my waifu because, they speak English. It's a loan word, more specifically a wasaigo, which will basically translate as Japanese-made English. And another example of wasaigo is anime. Anime, of course, doesn't come from Japanese, it comes from the English animation. And by the way, in this video I'm going to pronounce a few Japanese words and names, and I'm probably going to pronounce them very badly, so be warned. Okay, so what about the use of waifu in Japanese society? I'll let you guys pause the video if you want to read the text of those two sources, but to summarize them, these authors claim that the use of waifu in Japan emerged from younger Japanese discomfort with the traditional term kanai, whose two Chinese characters mean inside the house. Still, the use of waifu to refer to one's wife appears to be rare among Japanese. There are indeed other terms than waifu to refer to one's wife that are more often used than kanai, such as tsuma, okusan, yome, so I really can't say if the perspective of these authors is correct or not. So how was the term waifu introduced to the world of Western otakus, which is probably where you heard it from? So according to the website Know Your Meme, the term was introduced among Western otakus through a scene of the 15th episode of Azumanga Daioh.
今回はこの不思議なバトンがポイントでして。ああ。
なんだ？女の人の写真。綺麗な人やな。誰？
マイワイフ。
嘘！だって。
and then the term progressively gained popularity throughout the later half of the 2000s, especially due to its frequent use on 4chan's A, which is the board for anime and manga. Now that we've seen what are the origins of the word waifu, we can now look at what's its definition. Obviously, you are not going to find a definition in large major printed dictionaries, because not only it's a fairly recent word, but its use is mostly limited to otaku culture and internet culture. And you might also have noticed that this word is used in many different ways across the internet, and obviously no one can pretend to hold the so-called true definition. So together we are going to examine different definitions of the word waifu, and we'll go in a specific order, from the most empty and casual definition to the most complex and serious one. Some people use the term waifu to describe any female fictional character, so for a definition, it's as broad as it can get. You can see the term waifu defined in such a way on the website My Waifu List, where they list a large amount of fictional characters while referring to all of them as waifus, and yeah, they even go as far as saying that you can browse the waifus, so yeah, you get the point. This definition is not without any problem, the first being that it is so broad that it basically has no meaning. It's even broader than the term anime girl, as it can also include female fictional characters from video games, comic books, and mangas. Another problem with this definition is that it suggests that being a waifu is an intrinsic aspect of a character and that it has nothing to do with being loved or being in a relationship with anybody. So we won't go and say something like Rei Ayamani is Will Smith's waifu, for example. No, Rei will fundamentally be a waifu, regardless if anyone considers her the waifu or not. It will be like saying, oh, you see this girl? She is a girlfriend. Well, she might be single, but it doesn't matter, because she is fundamentally a girlfriend, like she was born a girlfriend. Next definition, waifu, female fictional character that one finds attractive. It's already better than the last definition, as this one does not imply that a character is fundamentally a waifu. But the problem is that it still remains very superficial, and the expression waifu material is mostly centered around this definition. And while in theory, waifu material can refer to a female character who possesses any kind of qualities that will make her a great waifu, in reality, most of the time it's used to mean this. Yeah, a female character you find hot. So, we're far from the passionate, intense love you'll find in Romeo and Juliet. Okay, definition number 3. In this definition, waifu is basically a synonym of best girl, which is one's favorite female fictional character from a specific piece of fiction or in general, and it implies a more or less implicit romantic interest. The problems with that definition is, first, it's redundant, it means basically the same thing as best girl, so what's the point? And it refers more to a crush than real love. Our next and final definition is inspired by what we generally mean by waifu in online waifus communities, which are communities for people with waifus who wish to share their experience with other fellow waifuists. I'll come back to such communities later in this video. So here, waifu is defined as a female fictional character whom one feels romantic love for and to whom one gives a significant place in their life. And by romantic love, I mean a real and sincere romantic love. It's not just a mere crush, and it's more than just finding a character super kawaii and wanting to have sex with her. And when I say gives a significant place in one's life, it's to put the emphasis on the importance that the character will have for the person who loves her. The character is truly invested through fantasy as a romantic partner. And this is the definition we will be using in this video. So keep in mind that whenever I will be referring to the concept of waifu, this is the definition that I have in mind. There are other terms that also need a definition, such as husbando, which is basically the same concept as waifu but for a male fictional character. Note that the term waifu is often used broadly as to also include husbandos, and which will also apply to this video, so keep in mind that for the sake of conciseness, I will be using the term waifu as to also include husbandos. You might have also heard of the term waifuist, which is a person who has a waifu. So it's basically like husband and wife, so you have the waifu and the waifuist who loves her. And there's also the term waifuism, which is a type of fantasy / relationship in which one has a waifu. So if I say my waifu is Flandre Scarlet, then Flandre is the waifu, I am the waifuist, and the whole fantasy / relationship that I share with her is waifuism. Okay, now that I'm telling you all this, maybe some of you are genuinely surprised. Like, maybe some of you thought that the idea of people taking waifu seriously was nothing more than a 4chan myth. Well, it's not. Some people do take this very seriously, and together we'll explore what it really means to have a waifu and how concretely it works in reality. First of all, do waifuists believe their waifus to be real? The phrases, your waifu isn't real and your waifu doesn't exist, became some sort of memes on the internet, and they seem to imply that waifuists actually believe their waifus to be real. But do they truly believe that? Waifuists know that their waifus are fictional characters. Like, they're not delusional. They are aware that their waifus are not material, are not alive, and that they do not possess either consciousness or sentience. Still, some waifuists keep a vague and feeble hope that their waifu might exist in a parallel universe or in the afterlife. Next question. How does one come to have a waifu? Like, how does it work? How does it happen? Well, it's important to know that you don't choose your waifu the same way that you choose a character to play with in a fighting game. It's not a conscious and voluntary choice. In online waifuist communities, there is a saying that goes like, you don't choose your waifu chooses you. And what do we mean by that? Well, it's not supposed to be taken literally. Like, there's no one who pretends that a fictional character will consciously choose a real person as a romantic partner. It's simply a romantic and figurative way to say that one day, while you are neither looking for it nor expecting it, a fictional character will spark strong and lasting romantic feelings inside of you. It will come by itself, as if it was the character that actually chose you. But now you might be wondering, how does it actually work to have a waifu? I mentioned earlier that you give her a significant place into your life. But how do you actually do that, considering that she does not even exist? Well, my broad answer will be by devoting time to her and by strengthening your emotional connection to her. Okay, but how does it work on a day-to-day basis? Does it look like this? Well, not really. So let's examine together how waifuists concretely live their relationship with their waifus. First of all, fantasy definitely has a central place in waifuism, and many waifuists enjoy imagining spending time with their waifu and doing activities with her. And you can imagine doing anything. You can imagine going to the beach with her, or playing video games with her, or having a romantic dinner with her in a nice restaurant. Really, it's really up to you. And you can either imagine spending time with her in the real world or in her world. And some waifuists not only play their fantasy in their mind, but also act them in real life by concretely doing an activity while imagining their waifu to be there with them. For example, I once concretely went fishing. I really went fishing in the real world. But I imagined my waifu being there with me and fishing with me. Another way waifus connect to their waifu is by talking to them, either by speaking out loud or by speaking in their mind. And you can tell your waifu anything. You can tell her the feelings that you have for her, you can tell her whatever thing is bothering you right now at this moment of your life, or you can tell her how your day went, you can tell her what you want to do for tomorrow, really anything. And some waifus like to imagine what their waifu will reply, while others don't. Some waifus also like to write letters or poems to their waifu. Me personally, I wrote a few letters to my waifu for anniversaries, and also wrote her some cards for Valentine's Day. Another obvious way that you can connect to your waifu is by enjoying her source material. So either by watching the episodes and movies in which she appears, or by reading manga, comics, or novels, or whatever, or by playing the video games in which she appears. Another way you can connect to your waifu is by taking an interest in what is indirectly related to her. For example, I remember a waifuist whose waifu was into programming, and he then started taking programming classes. Another example involving me this time, my waifu, Flandre Scarlet, is a vampire. So at some point, I just started searching information on vampires. And I've also read Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is arguably the most influential piece of fiction regarding vampires. Another quite popular way to connect to one's waifu is by watching and collecting fan art of her. So it can be images, videos, doujinshi, fanfiction, etc. Some waifuists will even go one step further and will hire artists to draw art of their waifu, and some also enjoy to get art commissions depicting themselves and their waifu together. Another way to connect to one's waifu is by collecting merch of her, and there's figures, plushies, posters, pin-back buttons, name it, the list is endless. And some waifuists even like to gather their waifu merch and create what they call a waifu shrine. And some of these shrines are rather small and occupy like only just a small shelf, and others are larger and occupy a big part of the room they're in, and others are so large they basically cover a whole wall, like if not more. Another very popular way is by using a Dakimakura, which is also known as a body pillow, which are very long pillows, generally 150 centimeters or 160 centimeters long, with the drawing of a fictional character printed on it. And the character is often drawn lying down, but not always. And of course, there are two sides on a Dakimakura, so generally one side is non-sexualized or slightly ecchi, while the other side is fully ecchi or sexually explicit. So as you can see on the picture on the right, one side is really non-sexualized, at least according to modern Western standards, while the other side is ecchi. Like the shoulders are fully uncovered, the top of the breast are uncovered, her dress is lifted up, revealing her thighs, but nothing extreme, so yeah, ecchi. While on this one side is just slightly ecchi, like she has a shy, blushing face with one finger on the mouth and the other hand is on her crotch, but nothing is revealed, but there's this slight ecchi undertone vibe. While the other side is definitely sexually explicit, with her breast and genital is exposed. So it's not just a stereotype. Dakimakuras truly are really popular among waifuists, but why are they so popular? Well, it's because, as objects, they are quite effective at nurturing a feeling of emotional connection towards one's waifu. Indeed, they allow waifuists to touch and see a more or less life-size representation of their waifu, and it allows them to partially materialize their fantasy by giving it a touch of reality. And so they are often used to feel a physical proximity with one's waifu and better imagine her presence. They're also used to talk to one's waifu. Waifus will use them to imagine holding their waifu, caressing her, etc. And of course will also use them to better imagine having sex with her. Now, maybe some of you are thinking something like, what the hell, dude? These Dakimakuras, they are just pillows. You are literally talking, hugging, and having sex with pillows. And to that I will reply, it's not about doing those things with a Dakimakura per se. It's about doing those things with one's waifu while using a Dakimakura as a proxy. And to better illustrate what I mean, we can actually make a comparison with the use of idols in prayer. And when I say idol, I don't mean its modern current definition, no. I mean its original definition, which is the material representation, such as image or statue, of a deity used as an object of worship. And note that for the sake of conciseness, I'll use the term deity broadly, to include not only gods and goddesses, but also various sacred figures, such as Jesus. The believer is aware that the statue in front of which he is praying is not actually the deity that he is worshipping. Like, nobody who's praying in front of a statue of Jesus actually believes that the statue is Jesus himself. Still, the statue facilitates the spiritual connection with Jesus. In a similar way, the waifuist is aware that the Dakimakura is just a pillow and not actually his waifu. But interacting with the Dakimakura facilitates his feeling of emotional connection with his waifu. And like I said, he is fully aware that his waifu doesn't actually exist, but he still can emotionally connect to her through fantasy. Marriage. Some waifuists marry their waifus, and obviously those marriages are not recognized by law or religious institutions, but nevertheless, those marriages allow waifuists to symbolize the significance of their love and their commitment to their waifu. In the vast majority of cases, those marriages are really modest. Like, there's sometimes a very small and private ceremony with no guest and no marriage officiant. There's sometimes a ring, sometimes a gift, and sometimes a little cake. But most of the time it's just the waifuist reciting his or her wedding vows to his or her waifu and declaring themselves to be married. Still, some waifuists manage to really stand out in the way they organize their marriage with their waifu, and we're going to examine some of those cases. In 2009, a Japanese man named Sal 9000, which is obviously a pseudonym, married Nene Anegazaki from the game Love Plus. The ceremony was held at the Tokyo Institute of Technology and was presided over by a priest, and they were joined by 40 attendees and watched by more than 3,000 people as the ceremony was broadcast live on Nico Nico, which was named Nico Nico Duga at the time.
故に私は父と子と精霊の皆固く節操を
And here's a picture of Sal 9000 and Nene Anegazaki during their honeymoon in Guam. Next marriage on the list, in 2010, a South Korean man named Lee Jin-gyu married Faith Testarossa from the series Magical Girl Lyrical Nanoha. The ceremony was held in Japan and was presided over by a priest, and Lee Jin-gyu dressed as Dakimakura with a custom wedding dress for the occasion. Next marriage on the list, in 2017, an anonymous waifuist on 8chan's board A married Oshino Shinobu from the series Monogatari. So, on September 18, 2017, Anon published a wedding invitation on 8chan's board A, on which he announced that he will get married with Oshino Shinobu on September 23 of the same year. And he announced that the ceremony will be held in a virtual cathedral and will be broadcast live on Twitch. Anon claimed that he had been working on this project for 5 months for a total of 479 hours on modeling, animation, and planning. He also claimed that he paid for professional voice acting. He also invited members of the community to post a picture of their own waifu in the thread so that those pictures would be imported into the virtual cathedral, therefore allowing other waifus to attend to the wedding. I myself watched his wedding while it was broadcast live on Twitch, and I'm going to show you guys some part of the ceremony. You'll notice that the video will be divided in two, as it was broadcast through the eyes of Anon, who was attending his own wedding in VR.
Welcome, brothers and sisters, new friends and old friends. Today we bring together, under holy matrimony, Oshino Shinobu and Anon. Anon has taught us that romance is not bound by our dimension. That 3D pig disgusting is not only a truth, but a reality. Please, no bully. With the power invested within me, I now pronounce you both husbando and waifu. You may now kiss the bride.
よく頑張ったな。偉いぞ。
That was quite a lovely ceremony. So, in 2018, a Japanese man named Akihiko Kondo married Hatsune Miku. The ceremony, which costed 2 million yen, was attended by 39 guests, and as you can see in the picture, Akihiko Kondo dressed his Miku plush with a custom wedding dress.
の形とか愛の形っていうのは人それぞれ違うものだと思うんですよね。必ず男性、リアルの男性と女性が結婚して子供を産んで結婚生活を営んでいくっていうような幸せのテンプレートみたいなのはありますけど、必ずしもそのテンプレートに当てはめればみんな幸せになれるわけじゃないじゃないですか。
Okay, moving on with technologies. Technology's development promises waifuists new ways of living their relationship with their waifus. Indeed, technologies that were once considered pure science fiction are more and more available for anyone to buy, such as virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, holograms, artificial intelligence, and even robots. And some people even talk about the coming of the waifu era, although the term is mostly used in a humoristic way. Different simulation games in virtual reality are about interacting and living a love relationship with a character, and some also allow the player to have sex with the said character. Other games in virtual reality are exclusively or almost exclusively focused on sexuality. Some of these games allow the player to create his or her own character, which is particularly interesting for waifuists who will like to create a model of their waifu. Now, for another interesting technology. The Japanese company Gatebox offers a machine that allows the user to live in the company of the character Azuma Ikari, which appears in the form of a hologram. The machine also has other functionalities, but talking about them is beyond the scope of this video. Gatebox describes Ikari as a bride, as she indeed interacts with the user as a romantic partner. One can also have conversations with Ikari, although only simple ones, either by directly talking to her face to face, so directly through the machine, or by text messaging. According to Gatebox, Ikari's attitude will change over time as you interact with her. For example, she will start talking to you in a more informal and intimate way as the days go by.
今日は一緒に暮らしてから3ヶ月の記念日だよ。覚えてた？
もちろん。
雰囲気変えちゃおうっと。3ヶ月あっという間だったね。いつもありがとう。乾杯。
Even though Gatebox is able to display Holo models' digital figures and also play videos of 3D characters created from software such as Unity or Miku Miku Dance, it is not possible to interact with these characters the same way one can do with Ikari. Such possibility will definitely be very appealing to many waifuists who will like to live the Ikari relationship experience, but with their own waifu. Still, Gatebox did offer the possibility to interact with Hatsune Miku as your wife instead of Ikari, but after searching Gatebox website, I just couldn't find any mention of Miku besides old articles in the news sections. So it made me wonder, is it possible that Miku is no longer available on Gatebox? The first GTBX1 model has just recently been put out of service as it was to be replaced with the GTBX100 model. So is it possible that Miku is a limited edition character only available for the GTBX1 model? Still, I did come across this picture on the internet which shows the current GTBX 100 model displaying Hatsune Miku, which therefore suggests that she does remain an available character on Gatebox. Still, the fact that there is no mention of Miku on Gatebox websites is beyond me. You will expect that they will like to promote this feature as it will definitely contribute to their sales. Is it possible that this picture only shows a prototype of the GTBX 100 model and that the actual model does not include Miku? I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you have any clue about this. One thing that is sure is that Gatebox did announce that they will release a new character platform framework, which will apparently enable users to live with a wide variety of characters. but it remains unclear if one will ever be able to interact with those characters the same way one can do with Ikari. Moving on to another technology, Hybri is a mobile application in development that allows users to create virtual characters with whom one can interact and have simple conversations. It even allows users to configure characters as either romantic partners or friends. Hybri uses mixed reality, augmented reality, or virtual reality depending on which mode is selected. And this application could be interesting for waifuists who wish to create a model of their waifu. Indeed, the application allows users to not only customize the physical appearance of their characters, including facial features, but also their personality. And you can even select an option for your character to have anime features. Moving on with robots. The technological advances in robotics and artificial intelligence allow the development of increasingly realistic androids. Indeed, over the years, we saw ongoing improvements on very important features such as movements, facial expressions, ability to hold a conversation, and recognition of interlocutors' behaviors and emotions. Here's a few examples of such androids, and you can easily find videos of them online if you want to see them interacting with humans. One company that is particularly interesting for our topic is the American company Abyss Creations that produce the realistic RealDoll sex dolls. Their most interesting sex doll is probably the RealDollX model, which has a robotic head, allowing the doll to move its eyes, eyebrows, mouth, and neck. It also has artificial intelligence, which allows it to hold simple conversations and also remember information shared by the user who talks with it. And finally, it can also detect and react to movements and touch. RealDollX could be interesting for waifuists who wish to get a realistic android of their waifu, as it is possible to select its physical appearance. Indeed, one can choose between different options of faces, bodies, skin colors, eye colors, hairstyles, hair colors, and more. And one can also select between 4 different voices and also customize their android's personality. And on a final note regarding technologies, I just want to say that waifuists do not all share the same attitude. Some waifuists are enthusiastic regarding the possibilities that technologies offer, and will offer, when it comes to simulate an interaction with one's waifu. But, on the other end, other waifuists are more skeptical. Indeed, some consider that technologies put waifuists at risk of forgetting who their waifus really are. The idea is that it could become easy to forget, as technologies continue to improve, that such technologies should not be used as an end in itself, but instead as a way to emotionally connect to one's waifu. A waifu who is still a fictional character, therefore a concept, an idea, and not a piece of technology. To better make sense of this perspective, let's go back to our comparison between Dakimakuras and idols. Imagine a world in which believers will no longer pray to the deities they claim to believe in, but will instead directly talk to holograms of such deities, or even androids of them. Imagine a Christian who will have access to a very realistic Jesus hologram with a super powerful AI programmed to provide complex answers and guidance based on what is preached in the Bible. With such technology, it could be easy for a hypothetical Christian to stop praying Jesus, either alone or in front of an idol, and instead just talk to this hologram. Indeed, the hologram is moving right in front of him, and it talks, and it provides direct answers and guidance, unlike prayer, which is so intangible and does not provide the immediate gratification that the hologram can give. Still, will their Christian friend really be talking to Jesus while talking to the hologram? Don't you feel that somehow he would have lost his way? Well, this is exactly what some waifuists fear regarding the technologies meant to simulate an interaction with one's waifu. That such technologies will end up taking us away from our waifus instead of bringing us closer to them. Dakimakuras and idols, they don't talk and they don't move either. They are just there. Still, their sight gives us comfort and reminds us that there is something or someone that means a lot to us. They don't talk, and maybe it's for the best. Okay, moving on to the next topic. You know, as a waifuist, you can't just go and tell people that you truly are in love with a fictional character. Like, if people ask you if you are in a relationship, you wouldn't go and say something like, "Oh yeah, my girlfriend is actually Sailor Moon." they will most likely think that you're either joking or that you're totally insane. So no, it's not true that you'll be able to just normally and freely talk about your waifu's relationship with everyone. But it's normal for people to want to talk about things that are important in their lives, and that's why we have online waifuist communities. Joining a waifuist community allows waifuists to share their experience without the fear of being judged, and it also specifically allows them to share their experience with people living a similar experience. Indeed, as a waifuist, even if you end up finding non-waifuist people who are completely open-minded and non-judgmental about your relationship, at the end of the day, these people are not waifuist and cannot therefore fully relate to what you live. And sometimes, you just want to have a talk with someone who's living something similar to what you live. Also, joining a waifuist community allows waifuists to receive support and advices if needed. Indeed, it's actually not always easy to be a waifuist. You're essentially in love with someone with whom you'll never be able to concretely be with. Waifuist communities therefore allows you to have a place where you can not only communicate those hard feelings, but also get some guidance. And finally, joining a waifuist communities allows waifuists to strengthen their emotional connection to their waifu in some way. Indeed, talking about your waifu and what you feel for her in itself can contribute to make you feel emotionally closer to her. Okay, so these are all the major English-speaking waifus communities that I'm aware of. There are also Discord servers and waifu threads on 4chan, but I'll cover it after. So, each of these communities have their own distinctive aspects. On a broader level, I can say that 8kun and Tono-chan are both image boards, and image boards tend to have their own ambience, their own culture, while Reddit as a whole tend to have its own ambience and its own culture too. Of course, that's just a generalization, but there's definitely truth to it. So we'll start with 8kun's Mai, which is definitely the community in this list that I know the most. So Mai, well, what can I say? It's my home, it's my hood. As I said earlier, I've been there since January 2016, and I've been a moderator since May 2020. And I've met great people there, serious waifuists, many whom I consider as my friends. I had a lot of great discussions on waifuism there over the years, and we not only have the board, but also a Discord. So yeah, if you like image boards and are looking for a waifuist community, then look no further. Next on the list is Tono-chan's Mai, which has been around since 2010, so they've been there for a while. Tono-chan is also an image board, and their Mai board seems like a nice place to be, like their catalog has many interesting threads so far, so go check it out. Okay, moving on with Reddit, and more specifically with the r/waifuism subreddit. It's a very large community with a lot of users and a lot of activity, which has its advantages and its disadvantages. On the plus side, there's always some new activity, but on the downside, when a community gets too big, it doesn't feel intimate anymore, as you can no longer expect to get to know everyone. Like, I know I personally feel more lonely in a crowd than in a small group of close friends. But if you like big communities, then you'll probably enjoy it. Now, r/waifu. r/waifu isn't really a waifu's community. I've put it on the list just because it's a big community and therefore I felt the need to at least say something about it, but there are no serious discussions on waifuism there. It's mostly just people posting drawings, videos, and memes. So yeah, I definitely don't recommend this one if you're looking for a serious waifuist community. And now r2dlove. r2dlove is one of the only communities that openly welcomes waifuists who have more than one waifu, or who have a waifu and a real/3D romantic partner at the same time. Other than that, it seems to be a community that cares a lot about political correctness. They even have a written rule warning posters about the use of pejorative language, as they say. Also, a friend of mine who joined this community for a little while said that people there seems to care a lot about the whole pronouns issue. So, some people appreciate that type of culture, so if it fits your tastes, you know where to go. Moving on with r/waifu soulmates, which is, to my knowledge, the only waifus community that refuses duplicate waifuists, as they call it, which basically means that a new member will be denied entry to the community if his waifu is the same character as the waifu of a current member of the community. So let's say that your waifu is Hatsune Miku and you want to join this community. Well, if there's already a member there whose waifu is Hatsune Miku, you will be denied entry. They say they do this for the comfort of the community's members. If it looks like an appealing concept to you, then go check it out. And now for the last subreddit on the list, our waifu spot. I really don't have much to say about this community. The subreddit itself seems to be abandoned at this point. Like, at the moment I'm recording this video, there's just been 2 threads since the last year. Still, they claim that their Discord is far more active than their subreddit, but the Discord link they provide is dead. So, well, if you're curious, you can still take a look. Now, other places worth mentioning. On 4chan Seaboard, there's always a waifu thread where people talk about their waifus, and those threads are always really active. So it's almost like a waifuist community within the C community. And same goes with the R9K board, where there's always a waifu general thread, which are similar to the waifu threads on C. And regarding Discord, there are many servers related to waifuism. Some of them are servers belonging to waifuist communities that we've already mentioned, but others are completely independent. Some are public, but most of them are private. Okay, so far we have spent a great amount of time talking about how waifuists live their relationship with their waifus. Now we can move on to broader questions regarding waifuism, starting with, is waifuism so out of the ordinary? Being attracted to a fictional character is not a rare phenomenon. For people who are used to play video games or watch anime or cartoons or read manga or comics, it's not rare at all to have a crush on a fictional character at some point in one's life, or at least some form of romantic and/or sexual fantasies involving a character. And one can't ignore the incredible amount of fan-made hentai produced each year through the form of drawings, doujinshi, videos, 3D models, images, etc. For those of you who are used to go on websites such as Gelbaru, Danbaru, Sankaku Complex, Rule34, Xhentai, Enhentai, etc., you know how much there is. And there could not be that much if it was only for a tiny minority of people who will fantasize on fictional characters. So the bases of waifuism are therefore derived from a normal and common phenomenon. But obviously, waifuism brings this phenomenon to another level. And on a broader perspective, having a relationship with a being that does not tangibly exist is a really common phenomenon, and we're going to see some examples. First of all, religion and deities. For millenniums, humans have been praying deities which one cannot prove the existence, and at least from a scientific perspective, those deities appear to be fictional characters. Next, imaginary friends. The observed prevalence of imaginary friends in children varies considerably from one study to another, and this can be explained by different factors such as the definition of imaginary friend, the assessment method to identify the presence of an imaginary friend, the age of the children in the studied sample, and also the assessment of the point prevalence versus the lifetime prevalence. In a meta-analysis combining the results of 29 studies, researchers Moriguchi and Todo found that 22.71% of children had an imaginary friend. So having an imaginary friend is a common phenomenon among children. And the presence of imaginary friend is also seen in adolescents and adults, but much more rarely. The dead. Talking to the dead is a really common practice. It's actually a very widespread behavior in the grieving process. Although less common nowadays, talking to the dead is also part of many spiritual rituals, such as in necromancy and shamanism. And from a scientific perspective, at least, there is no evidence that the consciousness or the soul of human beings continue to exist after death. And so, concretely speaking, dead people don't appear to exist anymore, as all neuronal and psychological activities are permanently interrupted, leaving only a non-functioning and decaying corpse. Dead people's nature is therefore comparable in some way to the one of fictional characters who never existed in the first place. Like, for example, my dead great-grandfather, even though he did concretely exist, well, now he does not, and he is no more real and tangible than Goku. Okay, next on our list is a very important question. Is waifuism LT from a psychological perspective, or is it not? To the best of my knowledge, there has been no scientific study on the waifuist psychological profile, or on their personal history, or on the way they live their relationship with their waifus. Therefore, you have to be careful when trying to figure out if waifuism is LT or not. Nevertheless, I'm going to try my best to answer this question. And first thing I can say is, there are different angles by which we can approach it, different perspectives, as waifuism is indeed a very complex phenomenon. So I'm going to try to answer this question through different perspectives. So, without further ado, let's dig into it. First of all, let's start with the basics. What needs does waifuism fulfill? Well, it fulfills social/relational needs, emotional needs, and intimacy needs, and sexual needs. And in this perspective, waifuism is LT, as it fulfills one's needs. However, this raises another question. With waifuism being a fantasy, can it realistically fulfill those needs as effectively as a romantic relationship with a real person can? Well, if we compare both of them, waifuism does have some advantages over a love relationship with a real person. Indeed, waifuism is definitely safer and more stable than a love relationship with a real person, and it provides more freedom in some way, as imagination is limitless. But, nevertheless, waifuism remains a fantasy. And you know, if you have to choose between imagining eating a delicious chocolate cake and eating an actual chocolate cake, well, eating the real cake is definitely more exciting, and will certainly better fulfill your needs for pleasure. Sure, imagining eating the chocolate cake feels definitely better than eating nothing at all. And in your mind, you can eat as much chocolate cake as you want without feeling sick or gaining weight, like in reality. And you don't have to pay any money at all to eat chocolate cake in your imagination. Still, at the end of the day, you probably wish that you could eat the real cake. You probably wish that the cake in your fantasy could become real. And this is exactly what happens in waifuism. Seriously, I have yet to meet a single waifuist who claims that he will rather have his waifu remaining fictional than having her becoming real and sharing a concrete love relationship with her, therefore suggesting that one's needs are ultimately better fulfilled through reality than fantasy. So, the wish to concretely and tangibly be together with one's waifu is a really widespread feeling among waifuists, and same goes with the pain of not being able to do it. Indeed, many waifuists, myself included, feel it's really heartbreaking that we cannot be together with our waifus. And no example illustrates this as much as the case of Taylor Gambora Aronis, a 15-year-old Costa Rican waifuist who committed suicide in 2016. In a suicide note, he expressed how he had been suffering from not being able to be with his waifu Ikaros from the series Sorano Otoshimono. He also expressed how he could not see the point of continuing to live if he could not be by her side. But of course, this is an extreme case, and I am not suggesting that most waifuists reach that level of despair for not being able to be with their waifu. And also, even though Taylor's suffering from not being able to be with his waifu was undeniable, we can suspect that there were probably other factors that led him to take his own life. And one can also imagine that his waifu was also a source of comfort for him in whatever hardship he was going through. But nevertheless, this extreme example shows that one should not minimize the pain waifuists can feel for not being able to be with their waifu. Waifuism is often compared to unrequited love, as, indeed, being fictional characters, waifus cannot concretely love waifuists back. Abram Cowley, an English poet from the 17th century, said something that I feel illustrates quite well what waifuists can feel regarding the fact that their waifus cannot concretely love them back, even though he was obviously not referring to waifuism specifically. He said, "A mighty pain to love it is, and it's a pain that pain to miss. But of all pains, the greatest pain it is to love, but love in vain." Waifuism is also often compared to a long-distance relationship, waifus living far away in their own respective fictional world. But then, Imagine a long-distance relationship in which there will be no means of indirect communication whatsoever. So no phone calls, no video conferences, no text messages, no emails, no letters, nothing. And imagine that there will be no hope at all for the two lovers to ever being able to meet each other in the future. It will be hard to pretend that such a relationship could be as fulfilling as a relationship in which the two lovers can concretely be together. So, as I said earlier, waifuism appears healthy in itself as it can fulfill important needs through fantasies. However, waifuism being a fantasy, it shows a limited capacity to fulfill one's needs as compared to a love relationship with a real person. And one common consequence is having chronic feeling of painful longing. So what appears unhealthy, and especially in the long term, is therefore not waifuism in itself, but to renounce to love relationships with real people in order to stick exclusively to waifuism, as fantasy is not as effective as reality to fulfill one's needs. Still, it should be noted that the practice of romantic and sexual abstinence with real partners in order to devote oneself to a being with whom one cannot concretely interact is not limited to waifuism. Now, next point. Could waifuism be used to overcome a severe episode of psychological distress? I have heard many waifuists say that they fell in love with their waifu at a very hard time of their life, such as going through painful depression. And many of them claim that their waifu greatly helped them to overcome the hardship that they were going through at that moment. In this perspective, waifuism seems healthy as it allows some waifuists to overcome their psychological distress and feel better. Nevertheless, one should not neglect to address the underlying elements that led to the episode of great psychological distress in the first place. And that's a central element, because there is a huge difference between having your waifu helping you to overcome your own personal demons and simply having her distract you from them. Momentarily distracting oneself from one's problem is not bad. We all need it once in a while. But at some point, you have to face your problems. We can also wonder, could waifuism be used as a motivator to take care of oneself, overcome challenges, and achieve self-actualization? Indeed, many waifus claim that their waifu is a source of motivation who helps them get the best out of their potential. And many also claim that they try to live their life in a way that will make their waifu proud. In this perspective, waifuism seems healthy as it helps some waifuists to take care of themselves, overcome challenges, and achieve self-actualization. So now for the final angle, the final perspective by which we can try to determine if waifuism is healthy or not. For what I've seen over the years, after talking to many waifuists and reading thousands of online posts from waifuists often seem to have had little to no experience when it comes to love relationships with real people. So could waifuism be used to make up for one's difficulty in establishing a love relationship with a real person? In this perspective, waifuism will be a type of defense mechanism which holds different names in psychology. It is often referred to as autistic fantasy or schizoid fantasy or sometimes just as withdrawal. The definition of this defense mechanism goes as follows. The person manages his internal and external conflicts with an excess of fantasies replacing human relations, more effective actions, or the solution to problems. Fantasy allows the subject to obtain a temporary and secondary gratification by imagining a solution to a real problem or a conflict. Fantasy is an inadequate mechanism when it is used instead of taking reality in account and dealing with it. So in the case of waifuism, this defense mechanism could be summarized as: you can't manage to get a real girlfriend or a real boyfriend for whatever reason, so instead of addressing this problem, you take refuge in an imaginary love relationship. So if waifuism is indeed a defense mechanism used to make up for one's difficulty in establishing a love relationship with a real person, then waifuism appears healthy as it allows one to fulfill their needs no matter the difficulty, which may provide some relief while one tries to address said difficulty. However, waifuism appears unhealthy if it is used as an end in itself without any intention of addressing one's difficulty. To better clarify this idea, let me provide an example on a completely different thematic. So imagine someone who is poor. someone who is having a very hard time making both ends meet, and who will consequently face psychological distress. Now, imagine that this person, from time to time, likes to imagine what it will be to have a lot of money. So he imagines all the delicious food he will buy, all the trips he will make around the world, he imagines the new house he will be living in, the new car he will be driving, and so on and so forth. And then, these pleasant sessions of daydreaming will help him to release the pressure, will allow him to take a break from anxiety and have some fun and comfort in his mind. And then he gets in a better mood and is therefore in a better disposition to face his hard financial situation and try to take concrete steps in order to get out of poverty. And he gets into action. Well, this person will use fantasy in a very healthy and constructive way, no doubt about it. Now imagine another person who is also poor, but who spends his whole days getting lost into fantasies about being rich, winning the lottery, and use those fantasies as an end in itself, only to avoid his financial problems and his psychological distress. This person will spend weeks and months and maybe even years developing a complex imaginary world in which he is rich, but never actually do a damn thing in order to improve his financial situation. That is not healthy. So in conclusion, to summarize the central parts of everything I said regarding the whole question of healthy or not healthy, waifuism appears healthy in itself as it can fulfill important needs through fantasy, it allows some waifuists to overcome their psychological distress and feel better, it helps some waifuists to take care of themselves, overcome challenges, and achieve self-actualization, and it could possibly allow some waifuists to make up for their difficulty in establishing a love relationship with a real person, providing some relief while they try to address said difficulty. Fantasy can definitely enrich one's life in many ways, and the inhibition of fantasy or a deficit of fantasy seems to be unhealthy. However, waifuism being a fantasy, it shows a limited capacity to fulfill one's needs as compared to a love relationship with a real person. What appears unhealthy, especially in the long term, is to renounce to love relationships with real people in order to stick exclusively to waifuism, which is the case for many waifuists. Now, I know that many waifuists could feel offended for what I just said, and one of the reasons is probably because they could interpret that what I am saying is that their waifus are inferior to real/3D romantic partners. And to that, I want to say, no, I do not consider that their waifus are inferior as individuals, if I can use the term individuals to also include fictional characters. Indeed, on the contrary, there are probably good reasons why they fell in love with their waifus, as they probably have great qualities and are probably good matches. And on the other hand, they are real 3D people with execrable personalities who make completely toxic partners. So the problem is not in the waifus themselves as individuals, but in waifuism as a type of love relationship, as it implies imagining a love relationship instead of concretely living it. If waifus were to become real, there will be no more problems. And on the other hand, if real 3D romantic partners were to stop existing concretely and become fictional characters, then we'll end up with the same problems related to waifuism. So, will all waifuists agree with my conclusions? Probably not. And it's okay. We all have different perspectives, and I certainly do not pretend to be waifuist spokesman. But at least, hopefully, I made my rationale clear, even for those who will not agree with it. Now, as for the last section of this video, we will now look at different scenarios specific to waifuism, and we will start with the following. What happens when many waifuists love the same character? Well, a popular perspective is that while there is a single character, there are many distinctive waifus. Even if many waifuists love the same character, each of them has a unique relationship with a unique incarnation of this character, that is, their waifu. It's a little bit like if a character, let's say Hatsune Miku, will simultaneously exist in different parallel universes, and that each waifuist who loves her will be in a love relationship with one of these unique incarnations of Miku. We often speak of an object-oriented perspective of waifuism as an analogy to object-oriented programming. So we are therefore less in something like this and more in something like this. Still, some waifuists feel jealous when faced with the realization that other waifuists are in love with the same character as them. And a minority of them will even sometimes display hostile and defensive attitudes. For example, some will claim that they are the so-called true boyfriend of the character they love. Or they will say that they are the one loving her the most, and then go and provide desperate explanations on why they are the ones who really loves their waifu the most. And it's often not the best arguments, like oh, I'm the one who loves her the most, as I bought $1,000 worth of merch of my waifu. Yeah, really, like if money was definitely a good unit to quantify love, like, yeah. But fortunately, those cases are rare. In contrast, other waifuists are happy to meet people who love the same character as them, and even seek to get in contact with them. I, for example, once came across a waifuist on Reddit who also had Flandre as his waifu. So I contacted him, and we exchanged a few messages regarding her love for Flandre. And it was a nice experience to talk to him. It was nice to see how this other person was living his own love for Flandre, and it was nice to tell him how I was living mine. Okay, next scenario. What happens when one's waifu canonically loves another character? You know, sometimes a person will fall in love with a character who already has a love interest, or who is in an actual love relationship with another character. Or sometimes, and it seems to be even more painful, someone already has a waifu, and then his waifu suddenly falls in love with another character, which can happen if your waifu is part of an ongoing series. So what can a waifuist do in such a situation? Well, I've seen waifuists do different things. First, they can recognize and accept that their waifu is in love with another character, but still continue to love her as their waifu nonetheless. Or they can create headcanon, in which their waifu doesn't love the other character. In such a case, they can imagine that their waifu doesn't love the other character anymore and that they broke up with them, or they can imagine that their waifu never loved that other character in the first place. And finally, well, they can end their relationship with their waifu. Next scenario. What happens when one's waifu canonically dies? Well, there are two main ways in which this can happen. The first is when a person makes a character their waifu after the character has already died. Like, imagine someone who played the original Final Fantasy VII on PS1. Well, after he finished the game, he just could not forget about Aerith and really started to develop feelings for her, even though he knew that she was dead by the end of the game. Well, this person could end up making Aerith his waifu, regardless of her death in canon. And yes, I know that she did not fully die, she returned to the planet, and she talks to Cloud and Advent children, and I won't even talk about what happened in the remake, but you get the point. Now, the second way this can happen is when someone already has a waifu, and then his waifu suddenly dies. Which can happen if your waifu is part of an ongoing series, and that seems to be way more painful. So what can a waifuist do in either of those situations? Well, once again, I've seen waifuists do different things. First, they can recognize and accept that their waifu is dead, but still continue to love her as their waifu nonetheless. Or they can create headcanon in which their waifu never died. Or they can create headcanon in which their waifu came back to life, which in some series involving magic or science fiction makes perfect sense. And finally, they can end their relationship with their waifu. Next scenario, having more than one waifu. Having more than one waifu is frowned upon by many waifuists, as they consider this to be either infidelity or disrespect towards one's waifus, or a selfish and hedonistic attitude where waifuism is not taken seriously. It is something that is banned in most waifuist communities. and you might even have heard of the expression that goes like, having more than one waifu will destroy your waifu. You might have heard of the term harem, which is often used to describe a situation in which a waifuist has multiple waifus. Generally speaking, for what I've seen, the more waifus a person has, the more likely other waifuists will judge this person and not take his relationship seriously. There are some very rare cases in which waifuists claim to have more than 10 waifus, and personally, I have a very hard time imagining how they could be deeply and seriously emotionally invested in all these characters. I have yet to talk to these people so they could tell me more about their perspective, but to me, it seems that they just created themselves a mere collection of 2D crushes that they had over the years. I have also heard of the term poly being used to describe waifuists who claim to be in a polyamorous relationship with multiple waifus. So, for what I've heard, these people claim that their waifus are also in love with one another. But I personally never had the opportunity to talk to one of such people. Next scenario, having a waifu and a real/3D partner. Just like having multiple waifus, having a waifu and a real 3D partner is also frowned upon by many waifuists, as they consider this to be infidelity or disrespect, not only towards one's waifu, but also towards one's real 3D partner. And many also consider this to be a selfish and hedonistic attitude where waifuism is not taken seriously. And it's also something that is banned in most waifuist communities. For the reason I described earlier in this video, I don't think it is healthy to literally renounce to love relationships with real people in order to stick exclusively to waifuism, especially in the long term. And so therefore, I don't think that having a waifu and a 3D partner should be frowned upon, because, in my perspective, waifuism should contribute to one's personal growth, not block it. And a love relationship with a real person should not prevent you from enjoying the freedom and benefits of your own imagination. Imagination and reality are two very important facets of the human life, and one should not have to choose between one or the other. Well, that's my perspective. And now, for the final scenario, having a 2D family. Some waifuists imagine having children with their waifus. You might have heard of the term kidfu, which is a fictional character whom one considers as their child. If the kidfu is a female, we'll call her a daughteru. If the kidfu is a male, we'll call him a sonfu. For some reasons, the vast majority of waifuists who choose to have a kidfu choose to have a daughteru. Kidfus are often pre-existing fictional characters, so characters from an already existing piece of fiction. In such cases, waifuists often imagine that their waifus and them adopted these characters. Other times, kidfus are entirely created by waifuists, so they are basically original characters. In such cases, those kidfu characters are often imagined as being the biological children of waifuists and their waifus. And in rare cases, some waifuists even imagine other characters as their family members, such as sisters, brothers, or even pets. And that's it! We're done! Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you liked this video. If you did, please give it a like. I hope the whole concept of waifuism is now clearer to you. Let me know in the comments if there are some aspects on waifuism that you would like me to cover in another video. I know that this video was pretty long, but there are definitely more things that could be said about waifuism. And also let me know if there are some things that I said that you disagree with, as it's always interesting to hear about different perspectives on waifuism. And well, have a good day!